Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 27th episode of Battles and Voices. I'm Lathika, and I'm the founder and host. Battles and Voices shares different experiences in healthcare in order to foster a supportive community for the future generation of medicine. Please welcome our guest, Tiffany.
Hi, Lathika. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for joining us today on Battles and Voices. Feel free to introduce yourself and share some things about who you are.
My name is Tiffany. I'm a registered dietitian that specializes in eating disorders and the intersection of eating disorders and chronic illness and complex medical conditions. In terms of background, so I kind of got into this field how a lot of clinicians in the eating disorder field kind of find an interest in the area. As a teenager, I struggled with an eating disorder from around the age of 14 to 18. I was in a residential treatment program for two instances during the duration of that span of struggling with an eating disorder. And I grew up in a household that was probably pretty typical, where it wasn't very 100% diet culture, but there was definitely discussions around calories, carbs. My dad has type 1 diabetes that he's had since he was 9 years old. So it is also kind of part of the medical management of that to for the person with diabetes to be conscientious of carbs because they have to know how much insulin to give themselves. But I think for me, I was probably just a kid that was sort of genetically susceptible. And that was part of my environmental trigger to kind of becoming too interested in that. And that kind of was one of the contributing factors to developing an eating disorder. I also had a lot of GI issues growing up. So I had multiple colonoscopies, endoscopies by the time I was 16, even predating the eating disorder. I had really severe eczema as a kid, which I actually continue to have as an adult. So kind of areas that I was more, I guess, like in tune with what was going on with my body. It wasn't like I didn't notice my body ever at all. There were things that kind of drew my attention to it. So that probably contributed as well as the fact that when I was in high school, I had a friend that I guess like trigger warning here, but committed suicide. That was kind of one of the environmental triggers as well. All that being said, so that led to developing an eating disorder, and eating disorders are just really hard to recover from. The relapse rate is incredibly high. So it's not an uncommon story that I had my eating disorder start when I was 14. I went to residential treatment. I discharged, I weight restored, did the whole thing, and then relapsed again my senior year of high school. And during my time in treatment, it was really a difference between the first instance and the second instance, where when I was 18 and I went back, there was kind of like this like last month in residential treatment that things shifted for me, where the first time I think I had no intention to kind of maintain recovery at all once I discharged. But the second time it was like, oh, like this is actually like going to prevent me from doing the things that I want to do. So I would really say that my recovery began when I was 18, and it was pretty thankfully like solid thereafter, which is also pretty rare, even though the relapse part of that is pretty common. But after entering into solid recovery, a couple years later, I was diagnosed with autoimmune disease. And that was probably something that I had struggled with even before the eating disorder, or maybe like during too. It was just never really, I guess, like at the forefront, or like no one would really like think to consider that because it just made the most sense to kind of consider it to be like all side effects of like malnutrition, the things that I was experiencing. So that kind of together influenced my interest in what I do now. But I think that in terms of the autoimmune diagnosis aspect, that was always something that was difficult to not that I have to disclose, or that anyone is expecting someone to fully disclose, but I think that it is part of my recovery story, or I guess like my health story. And it's something that felt like it was irresponsible to share. Like the recovery part was like responsible to share, like very like inspiring to know someone who's like recovered maybe, but then to share with others that I had an autoimmune diagnosis after recovery, in my opinion, kind of went against the grain of what was expected in the field at that time, where there's almost this expectation to portray recovery as something that is kind of like a panacea, where it like fixes like everything. Like there's like not really like any kind of health consequences that would happen after solid recovery, or if there's any kind of like GI issues or immune system issues that happen afterwards. There's almost kind of like this like finger pointing where it's like, oh, like this person must not be fully recovered if they're experiencing any kind of medical issues thereafter. So that made things a little bit complicated for me, where I would just disclose the recovery part. And even that in some spaces, it's kind of not perceived as maybe like responsible in some settings to share recovery background as well. Like I think different settings like think that different levels of self-disclosure is like appropriate or not appropriate. So that's kind of background. And I want to stop there to give you a chance to speak.
No, yeah, definitely, I definitely resonate with your story. I think what you're showcasing now in your life from, having an eating disorder problem and now that you're a registered dietitian, it really shows how much care and compassion you want to show to others who face that same problem when you were in your teenage areas. And I think it's really important what you're doing,
Thank you.
of course. So, Tiffany, what education did you have to complete in order to become a dietitian?
So with my whole experience, like personal experience with having an eating disorder, I kind of knew, like, I guess, like at the point that I entered into solid recovery, that like this was like it was already like such a big part of my story. Like, not that like at 18, like I would like know that, but I mean, I was right. I kind of had an instinct where it's like, okay, like this is like my thing. Where that was like the point where like I actually first decided to become a therapist, and then I switched majors in college. So like it was a really brief period, but like the first couple of years, I think I was technically like a psychology major, although like it doesn't really mean much, like what you have declared as your major at the very beginning, at least in my experience. So I first was a psychology major, then I switched to nutrition. So I did a undergrad program in nutrition and dietetics, and after you finish the undergraduate program, you apply to internships, and the internship and getting those qualifying hours is what kind of like allows you to sit for the dietitian exam. I think it's pretty similar to matching for medical school, where like you kind of like rank the programs that you want to get into, and then you do interviews, and then they rank you, and it's kind of like where it matches up. So that's the system to get a dietetic internship. Thankfully, I got into a program that had a, a graduate program and an internship, and also the option to get an additional graduate certificate specialized in eating disorders. So within that program, I did my master's degree, my internship, and that additional graduate certificate program specialized in eating disorders. I think that it was around like a 2.5 year program. And the last part of the internship was what was called a special interest rotation, where like, I mean, my special interest, like literally since the age of 18 was eating disorders, but it allowed me to really like kind of concentrate like specifically with eating disorders as it pertains to nutrition. And I interned at a group practice in San Diego. So my graduate program, which was actually in Illinois, and I had a really great flexible internship director that found a placement for me in San Diego, because that's where I wanted to end up. As a side note, I live in Tennessee now, but up until fairly recently, I lived in California, and that was my path at that time. you didn't have to have a graduate degree to become a dietitian. I believe that's different right now where you do have to have one, but it didn't really matter since it was part of my internship program. Anyways, I just got a graduate program as part of that.
That's wonderful. And I love how transition from, psychology and then, having the passion for becoming a registered dietitian. So, yeah, it was a really amazing story, Tiffany.
Thank you.
So, you mentioned earlier that it's really important to show compassion and patience when working with clients in your office. So, how important do you think healthcare providers should show patience while working with their clients and patients?
Yeah, I think patience is huge. I think that there's a lot of great clinicians in the field that don't have like personal experience with eating disorders, and maybe like they have like a friend that had an eating disorder, or they have a family member, but also some that like didn't really like have like a close person in their life with an eating disorder. But I think that having personal experience like really helps me to like have an intuition and also like patience that I probably would find hard to have otherwise. And I think that patience is so important because I usually work mostly with adults, and especially with adults, someone has to make the decision to make change. Like there's a lot more in it than that. To be able to enter into recovery and sustain it. And I think that in traditional treatment center settings, and I say this as someone who has worked at treatment centers before, there's almost this expectation for patients to change at a certain pace. And if they're not changing, there's almost like sometimes, and I'm not saying that this is like the case across the board, but sometimes like the clinicians putting pressure on the client, whether that be like ultimatums or trying to trigger fear to facilitate change. And sometimes like that fear is like valid. Like sometimes it's like medical consequences that are really real, and it's not intended to be a pressure tactic. It's just like sharing objective like truth and data. But sometimes it's not. And I think being a clinician who's worked at higher levels of care and also having been a patient myself in the past, that's something that's always irked me because I think that it's really putting, of course, it like the person in treatment is technically a patient, but it's almost demeaning where it puts like the clinician in almost like an authority figure where like they're the ones that kind of like say how it goes. Like you have to like almost like follow this authority figure. And if you don't, then you're like in quotes here, but like almost like disobeying or like you're non-compliant or like you're a difficult patient. And eating disorders are really difficult. Like, they're possible to recover from, like fully so, but they're so difficult to recover from. And it takes so much courage and so much moment by moment choices to first start the process of recovery and maintain that. And that is so hard. Like it is such an accomplishment to even make one change in eating disorder recovery. And I think that the level of um, expectation and like pressure put on clients sometimes, and even with like the co-occurring like medical stuff, which is like an additional specialty of mine, where patients are told that if they're like in treatment, and let's say they're constipated for 2 weeks, that they must not be doing something right nutrition wise, but also like the patient just may have like a motility issue that's like not just the eating disorder. I think that we have to have patience to just let patients have the recovery that is like meant for them at their pace. And like, sure, we can like share objective data. Sometimes like that is like scary data. Sometimes that means that like if things don't urgently change, like there might be medical consequences, but not everyone's going to be on the same recovery timeline. And I think we have to allow for that and also be present for patients in that instead of issuing ultimatums, and really the patients having the space to be human in that recovery process and for that to be imperfect. I think that that's really like what helps patients to feel safe enough to recover, to also be like honest with their struggles so that we can figure things out and help to build a sustainable recovery path for them.
Yes, I definitely have to agree with you, Tiffany. And yeah, I've experienced that firsthand of how doctors sometimes, of course they're busy, they have a busy schedule, all that, they have patients to see, but sometimes, I volunteer at my local hospital and I kind of see that like neglect of kind of like sitting down with them and asking them about their day, like how their life is. Besides, we're going to put you on this medication, do this, do that. And I think it's really important to just take a pause and ask them about themselves, because you do have to show compassion, empathy in healthcare especially when you're talking to patients and clients. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
So, I know we talked a lot about your work and then your education of becoming a registered dietitian. So are there any hobbies that you enjoy outside of work?
So I'm sort of in a one-dimensional person. And genuinely, like, just since the age of 18, like eating disorders is like it's like my job, but it's also like my interest. Like I'm genuinely like interested in like anything and everything to do with eating disorders. Like I love like learning about like neuroscience as it pertains to eating disorders. Like there's new types of like studies being done on psychedelic medicine use in eating disorders. Just like everything and anything that I can learn is like actually like enjoyable and interesting to me. So I do consider, I guess, like eating disorder research and like I guess like neuroscience research, like reading like articles to be like a hobby, even though that is maybe like lame and like not super like fun to like fun sounding. I also enjoy like hiking, but I just don't get to do it very often. But like being outdoors is nice. Um, I'm also like someone who takes like daily baths. So like I guess like that's like a hobby is like being in a bath. So like that's kind of bougie. But that's also how I relax. So those are probably like the main ones.
I definitely have to agree. Yeah, I love, learning new stuff and gaining new knowledge. So, yeah. So, Tiffany, do you have any stress relieving techniques that you use when you aren't having the very best day, or even when you have a hard time at work?
So I mean, kind of taking daily baths, one of them. One that like I think a lot of people would be like shocked to hear of because it's like, or people who know me, because it's like maybe not so much on brand from like the perception that I give off, but I watch like Kardashian reruns, like probably like at least like an hour a day. Like my husband like recognizes like all the episodes, and like it's just like something that like I really enjoy like having on in the background. And like sometimes I'm not even like watching it, it's just in the background. So like that's my version of like probably what like Friends is maybe for some people, where they just like find it comforting to have like the background noise.
Yeah, some of my friends love to watch like reality shows and
Yeah.
it's very easy to just put it in the background and then you work on something else and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I genuinely find like I know that it's like controversial, especially like in the recovery space. Like there's like a lot of like diet culture stuff, but like I genuinely find the Kardashians funny. Like I think that they are like very funny individuals.
I haven't watched it yet, so I might tune in and see, what's all
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
maybe you'll find them funny too.
So, Tiffany, are there any future goals you have to kind of further explore your interest in healthcare or elsewhere?
Yeah. I think just like um in terms of like the intersection with like chronic illness and like additional like kind of comorbidities in terms of like medical conditions. It's really something that like wasn't even like acknowledged until like the past couple of years, really, like in the more like mainstream eating disorder space. So that's something that I've like even before that had like an interest in like I would say like kind of skill set around, but I think that there's like new research that continues to come out. So I think like just kind of continuing to stay up to date in terms of like chronic illness and like the intersection of eating disorders. I think that one of the ones that there's like more information available around now is mast cell activation syndrome, like MCAS, which is kind of like a controversial diagnosis, but I believe it to be very real. And the incidence of MCAS and eating disorders is actually like very high compared to the standard population who does not have eating disorders. So I think that any information when it comes to like MCAS, like staying up to date, just like learning everything that I can is really important to me and also like really interesting to me. I've also like, and again, like this is something that like if people hear who know me, they're going to be like, "What are you talking about?" Like this is so like not you. But I've kind of had an interest in getting a personal training certification for a really long time. I am like not an athletic person. Like I'm someone who like I almost failed PE and I think it was like junior high because I would go to the nurse's office for like almost like every single PE because I just like hated it so much. But I think that the intersection of physical activity in eating disorder recovery, especially like as someone is like more nutritionally stable, is really interesting to me because I think that exercise and eating disorder recovery is oftentimes something that's just like kind of put on the shelf like during recovery, which makes sense. But then it's like never really like addressed. So someone is kind of like left like having taken like kind of like this extended sabbatical from like whatever physical activity was like present for them prior to starting recovery. And then it's just really hard to know how to navigate without also triggering the eating disorder. So that's something that's been of interest to me that I might take on.
I really love that, Tiffany. So is there something that you wish your patients kind of understood when it comes to seeing yourself in a positive light?
Yeah. So to be like fair to my parents, like I shared a little bit about my dad with his type 1 diabetes and like it's really not obviously it's not his fault that he had type 1 diabetes. It was just I kind of like observed those things and like that was probably one of the pieces that contributed to my eating disorder. But outside of that, my parents are really incredible parents. Even throughout my eating disorder, like however insecure I was like around like body image or just the difficult years of that, they were so good at instilling like worth and value in me. And like I always like liked like who I was or like my personality. I always knew that I was like really smart. And I think that that is just like a fully credit to them, where they were just like really good with like pointing out like my strengths and like I mean, I would do something that was like just like a normal thing, and they would be like, "You're so smart, like you're like brilliant," and they continue to be that way. And I think that probably like helped me a bunch. And I think that like not everyone has the I guess like the luxury of having that instilled. So I think it's like just really helpful to find something that like you're interested in enough to just like fully immerse yourself in and to just like see how like you are like specially equipped to be interested in that and like how like that makes you like unique and that makes you like really smart or like brilliant in that area. I think that like everyone has like their different areas of brilliance, and if someone doesn't feel that way, it's just like either they found the thing and they need to like kind of like recognize or like um yeah, I think maybe there's not a coincidence to the fact that like the first time I went into treatment was different from the second time. I think the fact that like the second time I was 18 probably helped a little bit, like probably helped that I mean, not to say that like adolescents like can't recover because they for sure can. But I think in my instance, like my brain was a little bit more developed at the age of 18. And I think um, just being able to see yourself in a positive light has so much to do with like liking parts of yourself. And I think that like being a little bit older than like 14 when I was like 18, I think that like just living on this planet a little bit longer, like it does not always, but I guess in my case, it does tend to help with like confidence and just like seeing that like everyone's like awkward, like everyone like has like their like struggles. Like I think that is actually like one of the benefits of treatment where you see like other people going through like their own struggles too. And I think that I really started to like myself a little bit more at that age. And my parents also did a really great job just like instilling confidence in me just throughout my upbringing, just like no matter what I was going through, like whether it pertained to like just struggles with like whatever, or like especially like the eating disorder, since that was a big part of my teenage years, they were always really good with like instilling that I'm like really valuable, I'm really smart. So no matter my struggles with body image and just like various different things, like I knew that there were at least like two people like that thought that I was like really important, like really valuable and really smart. And that helped a lot. And I also know that that's like a luxury to have that. But I do think that really helped with instilling value within me. And I think for individuals that do have that, like believe the people in your life that are like saying that you're really smart and like really valuable. And if you don't have that, I think that it's like really helpful to find something that you're really passionate and good about. I think that that can be a source of confidence and just like being able to experience like your own unique gifts, and how like it is really cool that like you're really interested in this one thing that like maybe like your friends like find like super boring. Like that actually is like really cool and like a strength. And I think that like hobbies, I guess, and interests and like really immersing yourself in that can be a good way to build confidence as well.
I really love that, Tiffany. So, Tiffany, is there anyone in particular that has given you the motivation to come this far?
I think for me, it's not like a particular person, but it's more so like character traits of like people that like I want to I guess kind of like resemble like in my work with clients and like in my work as an eating disorder and chronic illness dietitian. I think like anyone who is like, I mean, I hate incompetence. That's a strong word. So like competence is a really big, important aspect, but I think competent people who are also humble is always something that like I really admire. And like I think um, sometimes it's almost like with like I guess like hustle culture and everything. Like there's almost like this pressure of like okay, like don't be humble. Like you always have to just kind of lead with like just like all the stuff that you have to offer, or like all your strengths. And like sure, there's a place for that. But I think like humility isn't so much like not acknowledging your strengths. It's just like the fact that like you like in the relationship between a dietitian and a client like going through like an eating disorder and chronic illness, like the client is the most knowledgeable person in terms of like their experience of what they're going through, and they have like the most information, the most expertise around this. And being humble in that situation just means I need that information like from the client, and I need to learn from the client to be able to best help them. And I'm not giving them recommendations like assuming without taking in that information. So like that's kind of like an aspect of humility um, in my perception. And also just like providers that are genuine, and providers that are just like comfortable like being themselves is something that I really admire.
I really love that. And lastly, to wrap things up, do you have any advice to give to any of the members who are listening right now in the audience, struggling with an eating disorder or self-image or anything that they want to learn more about, becoming a registered dietitian?
Yeah, yeah. I think in terms of eating disorders, I think it depends a little bit on if someone is like a minor or if they're an adult. But I think the first step is just like sharing with someone what you're going through. I think externalizing like what's going on that maybe someone's kept private is a really big first step. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming to share because it feels like there's like the pressure of like, okay, like if I share this and voice this, then that means that I have to be ready to change. It doesn't mean that. It's just really like a foundational step. So that's like kind of like simply like what I would like say as like a number one step. In terms of self-image, I think that that's a tough one, because I think that um, it's like there is like an environmental like impact to that. Like I think that like some people have like just a environment that they grew up in that just makes it easier to have a more positive self-image, whether that be like people who have like instilled kind of worth in them. But I think the biggest step is just really like cutting down on social media. I think that it's really hard to feel good about yourself if you're like seeing like the best case scenario of like everyone's life and just like the most like just perfected version. I mean, even I like I'm hardly ever on social media, but when I am, like it's very difficult to not compare. And I'm an eating disorder dietitian who is like decades in my recovery journey. So that would be my recommendation there, which I know is like very generic.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. Social media can definitely take a toll on someone's life, especially with someone who is struggling with an eating disorder. So yeah, it's really easy to compare yourselves and, be like, I wish I was more of that person. So yeah, definitely a pause on social media would be a great advice. Thank you so much for telling us about your experiences to reach your career as well as educating the audience about your values. It was truly inspiring to hear about all the challenges that you faced and how you overcame them. To everyone tuning in, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Battles and Voices. If you enjoy this conversation, then be sure to follow, share, and stay tuned for more episodes on Battles and Voices. We'll see you next time.